Welcome back to Facts Intrigue and part 2 of our series, The Final Diagnosis, What Ended the Lives of Early US Presidents. In part 1, we explored the lives and final moments of America's earliest leaders, from George Washington to Abraham Lincoln. These were the men who laid the foundation of the nation, guiding it through its infancy and some of its greatest challenges. Now, in part 2, we continue our journey through the 19th century, exploring the lives of the presidents who carried the weight of the Union through Reconstruction, expansion, and an evolving political landscape. From Andrew Johnson to William McKinley, their legacies were shaped by the turbulent times in which they lived, and their final moments reflect the trials of their presidencies and their personal lives. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to join us for the next chapters of this series as we uncover the final diagnoses of these influential leaders. And now, we begin part 2 with Andrew Johnson, the man tasked with leading a grieving nation after the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. Thrust into the presidency after the assassination of Abraham Lincoln in 1865, Johnson stepped into a nation grieving the loss of one of its most beloved leaders. Lincoln's legacy as the great emancipator and the savior of the Union cast a long shadow over Johnson, who struggled to gain the trust of a nation already fractured by the Civil War. Born in poverty in North Carolina, Johnson rose through the ranks of politics with a reputation for being a champion of the common man. When Johnson took the oath of office in April 1865, the Civil War was coming to an end. Just days after President Lincoln's assassination, General Robert E. Lee surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse, bringing the long and bloody conflict to a close. While the battles ended, the wounds of war lingered, and Johnson's presidency was consumed with the enormous task of Reconstruction, rebuilding a fractured nation, reintegrating the southern states, and addressing the rights of millions of freed slaves. Though the Civil War officially ended in 1865, other conflicts continued during Johnson's presidency. In the Western Territories, clashes between Native American tribes and the US government escalated. One of the most significant of these conflicts was Red Cloud's War, 1866 to 1868, where the Lakota Sioux and their allies resisted US Army efforts to expand into their lands in what is now Wyoming and Montana. The war became a symbol of the broader struggles over westward expansion. On the international stage, Johnson's administration faced the French intervention in Mexico. While the US wasn't directly involved, Johnson's government opposed French Emperor Napoleon III's attempt to establish a puppet monarchy under Maximilian I. Johnson supported Mexico's resistance leader Benito Juarez, and by 1867, the French withdrew, reaffirming the principles of the Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine, introduced on December 2, 1823, was a cornerstone of US foreign policy articulated by President James Monroe during his 7th annual State of the Union address. It asserted that the Western Hemisphere was no longer open to colonization or interference by European powers. Johnson's presidency may be best remembered for its struggles with Reconstruction, but the challenges he faced, from rebuilding a divided nation to managing conflicts in the West and abroad, defined a turbulent and transformative period in US history. Johnson's approach to Reconstruction often clashed with Congress. While Lincoln had hoped for a unifying and conciliatory path, Johnson's leniency toward the southern states and his opposition to civil rights for freed slaves sparked outrage among radical Republicans. These tensions led to his impeachment in 1868, making him the first US president to be impeached, though he was ultimately acquitted by just one vote. Despite his controversial presidency, Johnson's story is a testament to the challenges of leading during one of the most fragile moments in American history. He served out his term but left office deeply unpopular, retreating to his home in Tennessee. In 1875, just months after winning a Senate seat, making him the only former president to return to the Senate, Andrew Johnson passed away from a stroke at the age of 66. Johnson's presidency serves as a sobering reminder of the weight of leadership, especially when following in the footsteps of a president as transformative as Abraham Lincoln. Ulysses S. Grant, the 18th President of the United States, is remembered as the Union's greatest military leader during the Civil War and a determined, though embattled president. Born on April 27, 1822, in Ohio, Grant rose to national fame as the commanding general who led the Union Army to victory over the Confederacy. His strategic brilliance at battles like Vicksburg and Appomattox earned him a place in history as a hero who preserved the Union. Elected president in 1868, Grant served 2 terms from 1869 to 1877, a period marked by Reconstruction and efforts to reunite a fractured nation. He championed civil rights for newly freed African Americans and worked to suppress the violent actions of groups like the Ku Klux Klan. However, his administration faced criticism for widespread corruption and scandals involving those he trusted, overshadowing many of his achievements. After leaving the presidency, Grant embarked on a 2-year world tour, receiving admiration as a symbol of American resilience. Yet his later years were marked by financial ruin and illness. Diagnosed with throat cancer in 1884, likely caused by years of heavy cigar smoking, Grant devoted his final days to writing his memoirs, determined to provide for his family after his death. His book, Personal Memoirs of Ulysses S. Grant, became a literary and financial success, cementing his legacy. On July 23, 1885, Grant passed away at the age of 63. After Grant's death on July 23, 1885, he was temporarily laid to rest in Riverside Park in New York City. This temporary tomb was a modest structure, meant to hold his remains until a more grand and fitting memorial could be built. The site was chosen because of its beautiful location overlooking the Hudson River, and because New York City was a place where Grant had spent his final days. The larger permanent memorial, Grant's Tomb, was completed and dedicated on April 27, 1897, on what would have been his 75th birthday. It is officially known as the General Grant National Memorial and remains the largest mausoleum in North America. Grant's wife, Julia Grant, who passed away in 1902, was also interred there alongside him. He was laid to rest in New York City at what is now known as Grant's Tomb, a grand mausoleum built to honor his life and service. Ulysses S. Grant is considered one of America's most famous generals and remains a complex figure in American history. A leader celebrated for his wartime heroics and dedication to unity, but one whose presidency struggled under the weight of scandal and the challenges of a divided nation. Rutherford B. Hayes, the 19th President of the United States, entered office under a cloud of controversy and compromise. Born on October 4, 1822, in Ohio, Hayes was a Civil War veteran who rose to the rank of Major General and later served as Governor of Ohio. His election to the presidency in 1876, however, became one of the most disputed in U.S. history. A compromise was struck that awarded Hayes the presidency in exchange for the withdrawal of federal troops from the South, effectively ending Reconstruction. As president, Hayes sought to heal the divisions left by the Civil War and Reconstruction. He worked to restore public trust in the presidency by opposing corruption and promoting civil service reform. His administration oversaw improvements in the nation's economy and infrastructure, but his withdrawal of troops from the South allowed for the rise of Jim Crow laws and the disenfranchisement of African Americans. Hayes served only 1 term, honoring his pledge not to seek re-election. After leaving office, he retired to his estate in Fremont, Ohio, where he became an advocate for education and prison reform. He passed away on January 17, 1893, at the age of 70, from complications related to heart disease. Rutherford B. Hayes' presidency remains a study in contrasts, a leader who sought unity and reform, but whose compromises left lasting consequences for the nation. James A. Garfield, the 20th President of the United States, holds the tragic distinction of having one of the shortest presidencies in American history. Born on November 19, 1831, in a log cabin in Ohio, Garfield rose from humble beginnings to become a Civil War hero and a respected member of Congress. His election to the presidency in 1880 symbolized a fresh start for the nation after the turbulence of Reconstruction. However, Garfield's time in office was cut short by an assassin's bullet. On July 2, 1881, just 4 months into his presidency, Garfield was shot by Charles Guiteau, a disgruntled office seeker, at a Washington, D.C. train station. Though the wounds were not immediately fatal, the lack of modern medical knowledge and repeated probing of his injuries led to infection and sepsis. Garfield lingered for 79 days, finally succumbing on September 19, 1881, at the age of 49. His death shocked the nation and spurred calls for civil service reform, as Guiteau's actions were tied to the corrupt spoils system. Though Garfield's presidency was tragically brief, his legacy includes the strides made toward merit-based government appointments in the wake of his assassination. James A. Garfield is indeed unique among US presidents, in that he is buried above ground in a casket that is visible to the public. After Garfield's tragic assassination in 1881, his remains were entombed in the James A. Garfield Memorial in Lakeview Cemetery in Cleveland, Ohio. The memorial, completed in 1890, is an impressive, towering structure that serves as both a mausoleum and a tribute to his legacy. Inside, the caskets of both President Garfield and his wife, Lucretia Garfield, are set in the crypt on display. Visitors can view his flag-draped casket, a rare feature among presidential burial sites. This unique arrangement reflects the respect and admiration Garfield held among the American people, who were deeply grieved by his sudden and violent death. The Garfield Memorial remains a place where visitors can honor his memory, offering a distinct opportunity to connect with history in a very personal way. Here is an interesting fact. At the time of President Garfield's death in 1881, the US government did not cover the expenses for presidential burials or memorials. After Garfield's assassination, the cost of his burial and the construction of the memorial was funded by private donations from citizens across the country. Chester A. Arthur, the 21st President of the United States, was a man few expected to rise to the highest office in the land. Born on October 5, 1829, in Vermont, Arthur was a lawyer and political operative who became closely associated with the Republican Party's patronage system. When President James A. Garfield was assassinated in 1881, Arthur, who had been serving as vice president, unexpectedly found himself leading the nation. Known as the gentleman boss, Arthur surprised many by rising above his reputation as a political insider to champion reform. Most notably, he signed the Pendleton Civil Service Reform Act in 1883, which introduced merit-based government appointments and marked a turning point in American politics. Despite this achievement, Arthur's presidency was overshadowed by the lingering distrust many had due to his association with political machines. Arthur's time in office was also marked by a battle with his own health. In 1882, he was diagnosed with Bright's disease, a chronic kidney condition that he kept hidden from the public. By the end of his term, Arthur's health had deteriorated significantly, and he did not seek re-election in 1884. After leaving office, Arthur returned to private life in New York City, where he died on November 18, 1886, at the age of 57. Though his presidency was brief, Chester A. Arthur defied expectations, leaving behind a legacy of reform and integrity in the face of skepticism. Benjamin Harrison, the 23rd President of the United States, served from 1889 to 1893, bringing a commitment to modernization and a firm sense of duty to the White House. Born on August 20, 1833, in Ohio, Harrison was the grandson of President William Henry Harrison, that we featured in Part 1 of this series, making him the only US president to be the grandson of another. Harrison's presidency was marked by significant achievements and challenges. He signed the Sherman Antitrust Act into law, the first federal legislation aimed at curbing monopolies and promoting fair competition in business. His administration also prioritized modernizing the Navy, laying the groundwork for America's rise as a global naval power. However, Harrison's support for high tariffs, including the McKinley tariff, led to rising consumer prices and dissatisfaction among the public. Harrison faced personal tragedy during his time in office. His wife, Caroline, passed away in 1892, just weeks before his failed re-election bid. After leaving the presidency, Harrison returned to his law practice in Indianapolis and remained active in public life, even arguing a case before the Supreme Court. In his later years, Harrison's health began to decline. On March 13, 1901, he passed away at the age of 67 from complications of pneumonia. Benjamin Harrison's legacy is one of a president who sought progress in a time of rapid change, balancing the challenges of economic transformation with a vision for a modernized and competitive America. William McKinley, the 25th President of the United States, served during a pivotal era of American growth and expansion. Born on January 29, 1843, in Niles, Ohio, McKinley rose to prominence as a Union soldier during the Civil War, where he demonstrated remarkable courage and leadership. After the war, he pursued a career in law and politics, eventually becoming a congressman and governor of Ohio. Elected president in 1896, McKinley presided over a nation on the cusp of modernization. His presidency was defined by economic recovery following the Panic of 1893, as well as a shift toward international influence. McKinley's support for the Gold Standard Act of 1900 stabilized the currency and reassured financial markets. On the world stage, he led the nation through the Spanish-American War in 1898, a swift and decisive conflict that resulted in the U.S. gaining territories such as Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines, marking the country's emergence as a global power. McKinley's second term began with optimism, but it was tragically cut short. On September 6, 1901, while attending the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York, McKinley was shot by Leon Czolgosz, an anarchist who opposed government authority. Initially, McKinley's wounds didn't appear life-threatening, and there was hope for recovery. However, inadequate medical care and the onset of gangrene led to his death on September 14, 1901, just over a week later. He was the third U.S. president to be assassinated. McKinley's death shocked the nation and ushered in a new era of leadership under his vice president, Theodore Roosevelt. Remembered for his steady hand during times of economic and global transformation, McKinley's presidency symbolizes America's transition from a regional power to a key player on the world stage. And so, we close part 2 of Facts Intrigue's Final Diagnosis series, where we've explored the lives and final moments of the presidents who led the nation through the late 19th century. A time of great transformation, triumph, and challenge. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know in the comments which president from part 2 stood out to you the most, and why. Don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with fellow history enthusiasts, and subscribe to our channel so you won't miss more fascinating journeys into the past. Be sure to watch out for part 3, the final chapter of this series, where we'll uncover the lives and legacies of modern US presidents, leaders who guided America into the 20th and 21st centuries. Thank you for watching Facts Intrigue, and as always, stay curious.